Hi, everyone. All right. SB 277 woke up a sleeping giant, I think. Yeah. Someone forcefully vaccinating my child? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm not going to stand for that. Today we're going to talk about SB 277. My background is that I'm a California attorney, and I'm the general counsel for PIC, and I help doctors, parents, and also schools with questions. I have a 100% success rate getting children into school. All right. Boy, how about this question? Does the government have the authority to require that a child be injected with a pharmaceutical drug in order to receive an education? I think if the courts asked that question, they'd get the answer. But they ask the question in a different way. It is how far does the right extend? Where does the right end? And how do we balance the rights of children to be in a safe environment, which they equate with vaccines? That, you know. So one of the things that integrative doctors are doing and showing is vaccine injury, to show that vaccines are not categorically safe. They are categorically unsafe. And to achieve the kind of court rulings that would overturn, to achieve even one court ruling that would overturn SB 277, it really takes a change of thinking, not just about vaccine injury, but also the prevention of infectious disease. So this battle against SB 277, I think, is going to be a long one. The historical lessons in public health law are that our right to due process, for example, our right to bodily integrity, that is the friend of public health. When we look at historical examples where there's an outbreak, and you really have to go back about a century to find it, but you find people don't talk with public health when there's an outbreak. They don't want to be quarantined. They don't want to be forcefully vaccinated, and so they generally stay away from public health. They stay away from hospitals and doctors, and this creates distrust. It actually spreads infectious disease. And so it's important to know when we have conversations with others who might be mandatory vaccination to tell them that what the studies show is that our rights are the friend of public health and not the enemy of it. SB 277, the basics. The law requires children from daycare through grade 12 to be vaccinated or to have a medical exemption, with some exception. And the medical exemption is valid at any time. And a medical exemption can only be signed by a licensed physician, which means a medical doctor or a DO. And it never expires upon reaching a checkpoint year like the personal belief exemption did. And so I'm going to answer some of these questions which I get asked regularly. Is it difficult to qualify for a medical exemption? That depends on who you ask. There are different medical communities in California. There is an integrative doctor community, and then there is a conventional doctor community, and they are just different. You know, you listen to Dr. Paul talk, and he is incredibly bright, and he knows things that conventional doctors don't know. He took the time to study. He wrote a book on it. And that is the difference between going to a doctor who's a conventional doctor just going to pitch the CDC schedule and going to an integrative doctor. So the first thing is it difficult to qualify? It's about going to the right doctor first so that you can get the best information. And the key word is integrative doctor. And the doctor's standard for writing a medical exemption is whether they consider it safe. And so they're going to look for factors. And it's the factors that are going to be most relevant are going to be whether the patient had a previous vaccine reaction or vaccine injury, other family members who have a vaccine reaction, and then other things like autoimmune issues, genetic issues, and so forth. And getting the doctor to listen to you, that's one of the most important things, because immunity, we talk about immunity being in the body, but really the first immunity is the parents. It's the moms, right? I mean, when it's, you know your child, and you know their sleep patterns, you know their eating habits, you know their personality. That's the first line of defense. And so you have to be diligent in knowing your child and then reporting what's going on to your doctor, and find a doctor who's going to listen to you. And the doctor who writes the medical exemption doesn't need to be the child's primary. It can be a matter of getting a second opinion if you choose. And the legal standard for a medical exemption in California is what the doctor considers safe. As I highlighted, there are different communities in California, conventional doctors and integrative doctors. And the standard for integrative doctors, we think, is different than the standard for conventional doctors. It's also untested. The interpretation of that legal standard, we don't know. We don't have precedents. This is a new law, and what the law says is that it's what the physician considers safe. So it's a matter of physician discretion, and we have a lot of very useful statements that were made during the passage of SB 277 that emphasize physician discretion, and we're really hoping that that is strong and will be upheld if need be. Child's personal belief exemption transfer, you guys probably don't need to know that at this point. Homeschoolers don't need a medical exemption. And IEPs, the way that that's interpreted for any parents out there who have an IEP, the way it's interpreted is that the child is only allowed to enter school to the extent that the IEP requires it. So if the IEP is only for a speech class, for example, the child can only go to speech without a medical exemption. For the rest of the day, they would need to be either homeschooled or have a medical exemption. Next thing that I'm going to talk about is this is called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, and this is it's also called the Vaccine Court. Just kind of speaking generally, and it was due to widespread injury of children and also an abundance of lawsuits that Congress enacted this act, and it formed the Vaccine Court, and it compensates victims of vaccine-related injury and also death. But it's very problematic. The judges are not real judges. The evidence standards are iffy. You don't get access to government records because the issue is not whether the vaccine manufacturer is at fault. The only issue is the causation of the injury. And the vaccine manufacturer, the manufacturers are granted total immunity, even for unsafe and recalled vaccines. The only exception is for fraudulent manufacture. And one of the main problems is that it pits the victim against the government, and that's just how it manifested over time. It wasn't originally enacted to be that way. It was supposed to be a system where parents would gain easy access to resources to compensate their children for vaccine injury, but it evolved into a system where the government just denies. They deny claims, and it's just become a corporate bailout for the pharmaceutical industry. So one of the things that we're trying to do at PIC is make change. Yeah. All right. The face of vaccine injury. This is real. Obviously, a ton of money has been awarded to victims of vaccine injury, but so many are denied or are paid just small amounts as basically bailouts. The way that this works is that if you have a child who has a vaccine injury, you're going to want to know how to file a claim. There's a website where you can find the rules and a form. There's a short form claim, and it's at the NVICP website. And the statute of limitations is 2 years from date of death or 3 years from injury. And if you if you're going to file a claim, you're going to need evidence. So you're going to need, obviously, the medical record and vaccine records, test results, even communications from you and your doctor. But another thing that's useful is photos. Sometimes photos that might not seem obvious at first, but they are really useful. Like if you have a photo of the child before the vaccine and then a photo of the child after the vaccine and maybe a droopy eye, just the little signs. It's going to be subtle, but and then tables are how the government kind of regulates this vaccine court. It depends on the type and the degree of the injury, but compensation depends on, first liability depends on whether you meet a rigid standard for when the injury occurred and what the injury was. So for example, developing anaphylaxis within a certain amount of time of a vaccine, it's very hard to meet a table injury where you get automatic compensation. So most parents find themselves in a situation where they have to prove causation because their child's injury is off table. And that means it takes time. And so how this shakes out in reality, and when you talk to attorneys who practice before the vaccine court, is that about 70% of the cases settle, 10 are dismissed, and 20% are litigated. But the 70% of settlements are really dismissals. This is like, it's just propaganda that they say 70% of cases settles. They are, they're lowball offers. And the settlements are just, here, sign this settlement agreement, now go away. And that's it. And when payouts are made, they're made in the form of annuities and structured settlements. And so that needs to change. And we at PIC want to make change. And a great resource for parents is the nvic.org website. And our next speaker is the president of NVIC. Yeah. All right. We're also going to have a Q&A. I think I kind of went quick. Did I go quick in my presentation? I still have more time. Oh, okay, great. We can do a Q&A. Yes.
So I have a question. You mentioned SC 277 in the legislators. It specifically said in gerrymandering references that they were widening the scope of what constituted a medical exemption. And then I think late last year, the California Medical Association, CMA, they came out and they said that if there was a complaint filed against a doctor that wrote an ME that wasn't in line with the CDC, that they would, take issue with that. So is that, one, do you know about that? And two, to be proactive, can someone like say, can they go back to Governor Brown, or can they go back to the legislators and say, the spirit that you signed this bill into is not being honored? So that, rather than dealing with doctors when they have a complaint, that you can proactively say, you guys, you're trying to, this California Medical Association is trying to usurp the law, right? So, sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. The California Medical Board did issue a statement, and I think it was in their annual newsletter, it was something like that, where they said that they were going to look at cases where a medical exemption was written and it wasn't up to the standard of care. But there is no standard of care, or there's no defined standard of care. It's in the physician's discretion what the physician considers safe, and the standard of care depends on the medical community. And the medical community of integrated physicians is different than the medical community of conventional doctors. And an exemption also is just that doctor's opinion. A medical exemption doesn't prevent the patient from going out and getting another opinion or going out and getting a vaccination. And I think I like your suggestion, where an organization, a strong organization like PIC, stands up and safeguards informed consent and safeguards the integrative physician and says that we believe that physician discretion is paramount here. And we want to protect the type of research and the type of thoughtful process that doctors like Dr. Paul are presenting, because it is just so much more detailed and thorough than what we're finding at conventional doctor's offices. The old legal standard before SB 277 was a rigid contraindication standard where it was very difficult to qualify for a medical exemption. You were basically looking for I'll leave that question for a doctor, but let's just say it was challenging. But now this standard for this discretionary standard should be interpreted more favorably, and PIC will be right there in support of our integrative doctors. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the status of the court case against SB 277?
Sure. Yeah, the question is, what is the status of the court challenge to SB 277? And the answer is that there hasn't really been a true challenge to SB 277 because either the case got dismissed on a early procedural matter, like a motion for a preliminary injunction, which has a very difficult standard to meet. It's an emergency motion. So there hasn't been a case that's gone up on any significant appeal. So we don't know what the challenge would be. And so when it does come up, I think what's going to be really important are the facts of the case. And perhaps we'll find one of those cases soon. But there's been some really good arguments written against SB 277, but I don't think there's been a full challenge yet. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could touch on the topic of titers, because the old law did specify that titers were legally equivalent to a vaccination record, and the new law doesn't address titers at all. So legally, do schools need to accept titers?
Schools will accept titers through a medical exemption. So you just submit your titer results. Well, they would come naturally through your physician, and then that gets rolled into the medical exemption, and then you're all set. Yes.
Wasn't there also going to be a lawsuit based on racketeering, the RICO Act against Senator Pan? Have you heard, was that the one that was dismissed?
There was a RICO lawsuit. It was like a private attorney general type lawsuit, I think by Travis Middleton.
And that's been dismissed?
I'm not sure what the status of that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question was regarding you said your success rate of getting children into school.
Mm-hmm.
Can you discuss a little bit of the status of that? Was that
Sure.
With children that already had medical exemptions that the school wasn't willing to accept, or have any of these been with children not having medical exemptions? And my next question is regarding private schools. Do you think that the government will actually have the right to be able to come into a private school and say, let me see your files to see how many of your kids are vaccinated?
Yeah. Let me answer the last question. The government doesn't have the right to go in and gain access to those records unless they had an order, either an order from the public health department or a court order. And what was the other question?
About if you could discuss a little bit of the status of the kids that you were able to successfully litigate or successfully get to school.
It's
Do they
all
have
kinds.
opinions already, or?
Yeah, I get them all. From personal belief exemption transferring over to have a medical exemption, or it's an IEP on a military base. A medical exemption from out of state, and there's always a way. There's always a way to make it work and work with the school and make it happen. And I found some interesting ones. I found one where a school official who was not even medically trained unilaterally changed a lifelong exemption into a one-year exemption and said, come back in a year and we'll check on this. Thank you, guys. Okay.